Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm Brianna Walker. I'm with the Union County Wildlife Chapter. We are located in the eastern side of Union County at the Union County Agricultural Center. So if you're in our area, please come to our meetings, join us. We love to have new people. We do meet the second Thursday of each month at 6:30. And next month, we have a speaker on wildlife rehabilitation. So we'd love to see you there. But tonight, we are lucky enough to have one of NCWF's own, Luke Bennett, who is currently the conservation coordinator. I think, tell me if I'm wrong, if I mess anything up.
No, you got it.
All right. So Luke is speaking with us tonight about his journey hiking the Appalachian Trail as well as the Mountains to Sea Trail here in North Carolina. So I'll go ahead and turn that over to Luke. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Brianna. Go ahead and share my screen here and we'll get rolling. All right, everybody should be able to see that okay. Let me go ahead and hide this.
Yeah, it looks good on my end, Luke.
All right. Yeah, hi everybody. As Brianna said, my name is Luke Bennett and I'm the conservation coordinator for the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. As we're all about to find out, I'm also an avid hiker. I completed the Appalachian Trail in 2021 and the Mountains to Sea Trail in 2022. Both great adventures, also plenty of misadventures along the way as well. I do want to mention that it was difficult, I'd say, to whittle down, these two big trails into simply a 1 hour long presentation. I do put my email at the end of the presentation. So if you'd like clarity on some of the things I talk about, there are a lot of different things that I go into that could in and of themselves be their own presentation. And also, before I go too far into the presentation, I do want to say how lucky I was to have the time and to have the means to go on these two large multi-month adventures. I of course understand that not everyone has the ability to put their life on hold for months to hike one of these long trails. Instead, it's my goal that by sharing my adventures, it encourages people to go outside and enjoy our amazing trail network in North Carolina. Even if it's just a short hike after work one day, or even just sitting on a log listening to the birds. What I'm encouraging, what I'm trying to reinforce, is that there's no right or wrong way to enjoy these trails. Got a little bit of a lag here on my side. Okay, here we go. All right, so why I started hiking. I grew up in Durham, North Carolina, so the Eno River was essentially in my backyard. I was through and through an outdoor kid, did not spend much time indoors. My mother actually had a bell that she put on the front porch that she would ring in the evening to call me inside. I spent a lot of time, flipping logs in search of snakes. I spent time building forts and climbing trees. Really, whatever I could do to spend time outside with my friends, with my family, with my neighbors. I eventually went to college at Appalachian State University. So I had the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains in my backyard, which I took full advantage of just about every weekend. Every chance I could get, I was out there exploring. That opened my eyes, just these wide open mountain spaces that I had really not much of an idea of prior to going to school in Boone, North Carolina. I was also a member of the cross country and track teams at Appalachian State. So I had this time, we had practice every day, and our practice consisted of getting in a big bus and driving out to one of these trails and running up and down the mountains for hours on end. So I always, I guess during that time, I instilled this need in myself to be outside, to exercise outside, to enjoy time outdoors with groups of people. I also, my dad kept me hiking quite a bit. When I was on the Appalachian Trail, he actually hiked the first 40 miles with me. He did bow out at mile 42. He wanted to get to mile 100, but I think he was, by mile 42, was in desperate need of a soda and a beer and a hamburger. So he did get off and left me to venture on my own. And I did on the top left corner there. That's my good friend Ellie. She also hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2021. She was a good friend of mine for many years, still is today. And she actually hiked the Appalachian Trail 6 months after tearing her ACL. So she's tough as nails, definitely keeps me hiking, keeps me inspired. Anytime I was griping or complaining about a little nag in my, ankle or something, she would never fail to remind me that she's out there 6 months after tearing her ACL. And so I'm just going to roll right into it, starting off with the Appalachian Trail, the grandfather of them all. Again, I did this trail in 2021, just after I finished up with college. The trail itself is just under 2,200 miles long. It stretches from Springer Mountain in Georgia and finishes at Mount Katahdin in Maine. And along the way, you go through 14 states. And I mentioned that it is arbitrary, but it definitely felt like an achievement to be able to cross into so many different states. I mean, you could be feeling really roughed up, but if you look up and you see, a borderline, realizing that you just, hiked all the way through Virginia, it definitely gets your spirits back up. And I do want to mention as well how important the Appalachian Trail is, how this is a corridor of wildlife, really, of habitat in the eastern half of the country. And if you look at the map to the left, you'll see that the trail goes very close to some really big towns, really big cities, and that makes this trail that much more important and very, really, amazing that this trail even exists as a continuous footpath in the eastern half of the country, again, where there are so many highly populated areas. And that doesn't just happen on its own. There is a lot of management that goes into the Appalachian Trail. There's a lot of maintenance that goes into keeping the trail continuous, keeping the trail as a continuous footpath. And that effort is really spearheaded by the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, which is a nonprofit organization. And of course, they can't do all of that work themselves. They are tightly partnered with federal land management agencies like the U.S. Forest Service, like the National Park Service, and in working together, they're able to manage and maintain this trail. And I do, of course, want to mention that within the Trail Conservancy, there are 31 trail clubs that are the on-the-ground efforts out there with volunteers maintaining the trail. I've seen them in action. I've actually had the pleasure of volunteering with some of these trail clubs, and they definitely mean business. You go out there and you're working hard, and it really helps you appreciate even a small bridge or a quarter mile of trail, just how much love goes into maintaining that trail. Thousands of volunteers or thousands of volunteer hours each year. And finally, I'll mention that there are 165,000 white blazes, so it is very difficult to get lost as you're hiking. Funny enough, the only time I truly got lost was on the first day. So it wasn't a great start to the journey, but it got that out of the way. And after that, it was pretty much smooth sailing in terms of navigation. In some spots, it seems like there's a white blaze on every other tree. And I'll mention real quick, again, this could be its own presentation, but people always ask me, how much did your pack weigh? Well, my backpack weighed about 28 pounds on average, and that includes fuel, that includes water, that includes food. It fluctuated a little bit, but typically it was around 28 pounds. And it was important for me to keep my pack weight as low as possible, not going crazy. I wanted to make sure I had everything I needed, but I saw plenty of people that were hiking on beautiful mountain ridges on a bright sunny day, but their pack is 60 pounds and they're miserable. So I wanted to make sure I was enjoying myself out there. So I kept things as minimal as possible. I'm a very tall guy, about 6'5", so it was tricky to find things that fit me. That being said, I did land on a lot of very quality gear items. My shelter was perfect, sleeping bag, sleeping pad, all sorts of good stuff. I was on a pretty tight budget, just, considering I was right out of school, but at the same time, I was able to find things on a budget that, served their purpose. Another common question I get is, what the heck did you eat while you were hiking on the Appalachian Trail? And that's a pretty intense question. There's a lot of things I ate on there, but what I like to tell people is I ascribe by the seafood diet, which essentially means seafood, eat food. Anything I saw, I was going to eat. I was burning calories like a madman out there. As you can imagine, walking all day, you develop what they call the hiker hunger. So anytime I had a chance to shove my face with food, I was hopping on that opportunity. That middle picture there is, I think that's a concoction of ramen and rice and maybe a salmon packet. I'm not sure, but essentially what it boils down to is gorp. So I ate a lot of gorp on the trail, which is essentially just a mash of calories. Breakfast was a lot of oatmeal with nuts and an offensive amount of peanut butter on top. I also infused my oatmeal with instant coffee, so I got that nice little kick at the start of the day. For lunch, I would do a lot of tuna packets in tortilla wraps, and for dinner, I would do all sorts of stuff, but mostly rice, beans, ramen noodles, salmon packets, and always ending the day with the much needed candy bar. And about every 3 to 5 days, I would stop, leave the trail. Typically, I would hitch a ride into town to resupply, again, about every 3 to 5 days. And believe me, I took that opportunity to indulge in all the town luxuries. The top right there, that's an apple pie. I ate no shortage of good, not so healthy, but nutrient-rich food, I guess you could say. And so plant life on the Appalachian Trail. The trail is often called the Green Tunnel because hikers are enclosed by tree cover for most of the way. The Appalachian Trail is very biodiverse in terms of plant life, more than 2,000 species of plants, 200 species living only in the southern Appalachians. I was very fortunate to be able to hike, especially when I did, which is primarily in the summer. So things were thick and green and blooming. It was a beautiful time to be on the Appalachian Trail. And that picture on the far right there is the Kefir oak. That oak is 300 years old and 60 feet tall. A picture certainly doesn't do it justice. It was a behemoth of a tree. On that day that I walked by, it was guarded by an army of mosquitoes, so I wasn't able to get too close, but I was able to gaze upon it from afar and enjoy it in all its majesty, right? And then animals on the Appalachian Trail, wildlife. So of course, if you have high plant biodiversity, most of the time along with that is going to be a biodiverse animal life. And again, I saw no shortage of animals while I was on the Appalachian Trail. In 2021, it was a cicada year, so I was able to hike alongside these deafening little insects. It got to the point where I'd be hiking with a buddy and we would just have to shut up because these cicadas were just so loud, so intense and deafening to the point where when they would finally stop, we could still hear them ringing in our ears. I saw a lot of eastern newts on the trail, that picture in the far right there. Especially in the mid-Atlantic, those guys were all over the place. They littered the forest floor to the point where in the evenings, I would look out and it was almost like these little tiny flashlights, all scattered all over the forest floor. And my size 14 shoe, I had to be very careful with where I stepped. Sometimes I'd be coming down, I'd look down and there'd be 2 or 3 of these guys right underneath my shoe. So I had to be very careful, but it was really cool to be able to see these guys out and about. I saw a lot of birds on the trail. What stands out to me are the barred owls that I encountered while I was on the Appalachian Trail. I don't know if I was special or what was going on, but it seemed like wherever I would put my tent at night, there was always a barred owl that would perch right above me or very close to my tent. And without fail, 2 or 3 in the morning, the barred owl would just start hooting and hollering and waking everybody up that was camping. And sometimes another barred owl would come in and it would just be shrieking and hollering. I'm not sure if they were having sex or if they were fighting or what they were doing, but I never was bothered by it. I always kind of woke up, I was startled awake with a smile on my face, knowing just how rare and special this is to be able to, be sitting awake in the middle of the night listening to barred owls. I also want to mention that there are moose on the Appalachian Trail, plenty of mammals, black bears, squirrels, rabbits, you name it. I never saw a moose while I was on the Appalachian Trail. I saw plenty of moose poop, but never a moose, which was surprising considering how large, how heavy these animals are, just to understand how they can just move through the forest so stealthy, and just drop their poop everywhere without anybody ever seeing them, or at least me. And so I do want to mention that there is potentially harmful wildlife on the Appalachian Trail. Again, this could be its own presentation, but what's important here that I want to mention is that wherever you're going, doesn't have to be the Appalachian Trail. It could just be, it could just be a greenway behind your house. You always want to research and prepare wherever you're going. Again, I'm not going to go into how to prevent some of these encounters or what to do, but I just want to, reinforce that there is harmful wildlife out there, and it's important to know your place and to know that you're in a wild space, you're in a habitat, and those animals belong there, as do you. So it's good to just keep your distance, keep a safe distance, and respect wildlife's space. Plenty of black bears. I probably saw between 15 and 20 black bears while I was hiking on the Appalachian Trail. I saw snakes while I was on the Appalachian Trail, timber rattlesnakes, eastern copperheads. My buddy who I was hiking with at the time, he was walking, it was in Pennsylvania, and he was about to step on a timber rattlesnake, didn't have a care in the world, wasn't looking down, didn't notice it, and I saw it. And I pushed him off the trail into a patch of briars, and at that time I didn't know him very well, so I think he thought that I was attacking him or something, but I just told him, hey man, look, there's a timber rattlesnake right there and you're about to step on it. So I do hold that against him to this day, that I saved his life while we were out in Pennsylvania encountering all these timber rattlesnakes. Of course, there are spiders out there, there are stinging insects, plenty of poisonous plants. Poison ivy is a big one. I was very fortunate not to get poison ivy while I was on the Appalachian Trail. Crazy enough, I didn't get a poison ivy rash until just over a year ago when I was helping one of the chapters with a gardening event. So I am susceptible to poison ivy, but it took me a long time to learn that. Mice, there are plenty of mice on the Appalachian Trail. There are a lot of shelters on the Appalachian Trail that the mice like to hang out near. Lots of horror stories when it comes to mice. They will get your food if you're not careful. If you don't hang your food correctly at night, the mice are going to go after it. There's been stories of mice burrowing into people's packs, leaving holes just to get to a crumb of a Cliff Bar. There's also been horror stories of mice crawling into people's mouths while they're sleeping. That may or may not be true. It's probably just a cautionary tale so people hang their food correctly at night. But who knows? They are very eager to get folks' food and get into people's space. There are ticks on the Appalachian Trail, of course, especially as you get into the northeast part of the trail. And I actually had Lyme disease myself, so I did not take this lightly. There are ways to mitigate, your encounters with Lyme disease and ticks. And again, it just involves doing your research prior to going on a trip like this. And then biggest challenges and mistakes. I'm not going to go over all of these, but I do want to mention a few. So biggest challenges, as you can imagine, weather was the primary challenge while I was hiking on the trail. I saw the full spectrum of weather while I was hiking. That picture at the bottom left there, that is myself on Mount Washington summit in New Hampshire, and that's in late July. So the heart of summer, I got up to the summit and I had to put every item of clothing in my backpack on my body. It was freezing up there. The wind speed was out of control. It was sleeting, and it's just really crazy how in the middle of summer I would have to put on all my clothes and be fighting for warmth. Another big challenge on the trail was the terrain. As I'm sure we all can imagine, the terrain gets pretty rough while you're hiking on the trail. That picture in the middle is in Pennsylvania, otherwise known as Rocksylvania. And that's not an outcropping on the side of the trail. That is the trail. For miles and miles in northern Pennsylvania, you've got to essentially boulder hop trying to move along the trail. And that picture at the bottom right there, I didn't extend that. I didn't want to scare anybody away. That is a picture of my feet after hiking in Vermont all day. It was particularly rainy as I was hiking through. So the mud was, up to my ankles at times, up to my calves. And it was all day just sloshing, foot slogging through the mud to the point where it was so caked on my legs. I would be scrubbing my legs for 20, 30 minutes in a stream, and I still wouldn't get it all off. And that is why Vermont is nicknamed Vermud, very aptly named. And that picture at the top right, again, that's not a creek, that's not a stream, that is the trail. That's after a heavy rain in Massachusetts, and that was up to my mid-thigh. And again, I'm 6'5", so just imagine some of the shorter folks that were really up to their waist as they were trying to slog through for over a mile. And then biggest mistakes, I don't want to cover all of these, but I will mention that when I hiked the Appalachian Trail, that was right after college, and I still had that competitive endurance mindset instilled in me. Fortunately, I have really, I think, done a great job putting that to the side, and I can really thank, just lately I've been, when I go hiking in the woods, I hike pretty slow nowadays because I'm looking for birds, I'm looking for plants, I'm focused on what's around me, what's above me, not so much head down hiking. But when I was on the Appalachian Trail, I did go pretty fast at times. And I did this thing called the 4-State Challenge, which in hindsight was a big mistake. I don't recommend anybody do this, but what that challenge is hiking 45 miles in less than 24 hours. And in doing so, you touch 4 states. You start at the West Virginia border, you hike through Maryland, and you finish at the Mason-Dixon line in Pennsylvania, 4 states in under 24 hours. And I completed it, but I was a wreck afterward. It really broke me down. I was kind of just really frustrated with myself for going after something like that and really putting my hike at risk by doing a big challenge like that. But at the end of the day, you live and learn. And then most difficult sections, the White Mountains are notorious for being the most difficult stretch of trail that is in New Hampshire. A lot of the trail, you'll have switchbacks as you go up and down mountains, so it's more of a gradual climb. But in the White Mountains, it's straight up the mountain and then it's straight down the mountain. It's no frills. You're going up the mountain whatever way it takes you. So it's a lot of scrambling, a lot of climbing, and a lot of really rough descending as well. And then northern Pennsylvania with the rocks. Southern Maine, you have the Mahoosic Notch, which is the most difficult mile on trail. In my book, it took me over 3 hours to hike 1 mile. Mahoosic Notch, it's essentially a boulder field where you've got to wiggle and weave your way in and out of cracks and crevices in rocks. And it's very frustrating. I did so on a day where it was raining and I had a full pack, so it took me a long time to get through that mile. New York was difficult simply because when I went through, it was abnormally hot. There was a big heat wave that came through, and then Vermont, of course, with the mud. And then favorite sections and towns, I have to shout out the Grayson Highlands. Not many places you get to see wild ponies, and that was a place where I used to backpack while I was in college. The 100-mile wilderness in Maine, I felt very lucky to be able to experience what, in my eyes, felt like true wilderness. And again, you don't get that experience very often, especially in the eastern half of the United States. It's hard to find true wilderness. And in Maine, there are 100 miles of trail that, again, in my book, I would consider wilderness. Really a beautiful area. Roan Highlands in North Carolina, another area where I would hike or where I'd backpack while I was in school. So it was really cool to be able to see that again. Favorite towns on the Appalachian Trail: Damascus, that is the trail town. They have the annual Appalachian Trail Festival there each year, trail days. So they do a great job catering to hikers as they're walking through. Millinocket was one of my favorite towns. That's in Maine. That was the last town that I stopped. So after I finished the trail, I went into Millinocket and I had an entire pizza and I was drinking beer and I was having a great time. I had this big, sense of achievement, accomplishment, knowing that I just finished the trail. So Millinocket will always have a special place in my heart. Hanover in New Hampshire. The trail goes right through Hanover, and that is home to Dartmouth's campus. So the trail, yes, goes right through Dartmouth's campus. And there's a post office close by. My parents knew that I would be walking through, and kindly they sent me a care package. So I stopped in at the post office there and picked up the care package from my parents, and they know me very well because it was filled with pumpkin bread. The whole box was filled with loaves and loaves of pumpkin bread. So I spent the better half of that afternoon sitting on Dartmouth's campus as nicely dressed students and professors were walking by, and I was eagerly stuffing my face with pumpkin bread smelling like a dumpster. So folks were taking quite a wide berth around me, but I was as happy and content as I could ever be. And that brings me to the northern terminus, Mount Katahdin, over 5,000 feet. This is an epic end to an epic journey in my book. Really a special mountain. And I thought, well, sometimes when you're hiking, especially on the Appalachian Trail, you go up and down a lot of mountains. And I thought that I could see the summit. I thought I could see the northern terminus, the summit of Mount Katahdin. And a lot of times this will happen while you're on the trail. You see these false summits, and then you get to the top and you realize you have to hike more. You have to hike more to get to the summit. So while I was going up Mount Katahdin, again, I saw what I thought to be the summit, and I got all excited. I said, oh man, there it is. That's the end of the Appalachian Trail. And then the memories of the journey were coming back. They were flooding me. I was overwhelmed with emotion. I was crying, sobbing. Dare I say, I was, sprinting up. I thought I was going to make it. I was like, there it is. And then I get to the top and I realize that this isn't the summit. I've got another 2 miles to go. So I gathered myself. I was very dehydrated after essentially losing all the fluid in my body in tears. And eventually 2 miles later, I did make it to the northern terminus, Mount Katahdin. I wouldn't say there was any great epiphany when I reached the summit. I would say that those lessons learned are scattered throughout the journey itself, but it was nice to have that feeling of accomplishment and to be able to sit up there for a while and just bask in all the memories and think about all the people I met and all the things I learned and, maybe what I wanted to do next. So that brings me to 7 months later. I certainly indulged in a lot of comforts while, the first couple weeks after completing the Appalachian Trail, but those comforts wear off, normal sinks in, and I got itchy feet. And so I was saving my money for 7 months, and I knew I wanted to do another adventure, one more, right? And I decided on the Mountains to Sea Trail, which is a true journey across North Carolina. It showcases the diversity that is North Carolina. I started in the Outer Banks, Jockey's Ridge. I hiked west through the Piedmont into the mountains, eventually reaching the western terminus, Clingman's Dome. And that trail is the Mountain Sea Trail is just under 1,200 miles, so it's certainly not the most efficient way to get across the state. You could probably get on I-40 and get across the state in 500 miles or so, but it does showcase, the beautiful parts of North Carolina. I think it's all beautiful, but this trail really does intentionally take you through some of the more scenic places in North Carolina. And as you can see in the coastal plain there's a loop. So for folks that go west to east, they have an option of skipping that bottom portion there and instead paddling the Neuse River and linking back up to the trail around New Bern. I think that's a cool option. I couldn't do it going east to west. I didn't want to paddle upstream. I don't even know if that'd be possible, but so I did take the lower route there, the walking route. And I want to mention that the trail is built and maintained by volunteers, a lot like the Appalachian Trail. This effort is spearheaded by another organization known as the Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail, a nonprofit. And they do a wonderful job mobilizing volunteers to get out there and work on maintaining and managing the trail. And of course, that's not done by themselves. They partner with local, state, federal land management agencies to make sure this remains a trail. That being said, it's still in its infancy stage. The current route includes 700 miles of trail and about 475 miles of connecting roads. Sometimes that's sleepy country roads. Other times it's busy highways, which gets a little bit sketchy. But all the while, I felt very fortunate that I was able to experience this trail while it's still in its infancy stage. There's a lot of support for the Mountains to Sea Trail, and I have a lot of confidence that eventually this will become a continuous footpath like the Appalachian Trail is, but it's going to take a lot of volunteer hours. And I think that the trail will get there. So why I decided to hike the Mountains to Sea Trail, what it really boils down to is I grew up in North Carolina and I wanted to give back to this state that has brought my life so much meaning, all the wildlife and the habitat. And I realized, on the Appalachian Trail, it was more of a solitary experience for me. I didn't take many pictures. I didn't post on social media. My friends and family knew what I was doing, but it wasn't a public hike, I guess you could say. But this time I wanted to do things differently. I realized how much attention a hike like this gathers, and I wanted to make sure that I deflected the attention off of myself and redirected that attention onto something I cared about. And my idea of how to do that was to partner with an organization and raise money for them through this hike. So I did some research and I landed on the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, and I contacted Kate Greiner, who is to this day the Vice President of Philanthropy at NCWF. I told her my idea. I said I wanted to hike the MST and I wanted to do so while also raising money for you guys to spend on wildlife and habitat conservation. And she matched my enthusiasm and then added about 10 notches. So I was really enthusiastic about the idea at that point. I knew that I made the right decision. This was going to be a great partnership. It was going to be a lot of fun to work together with an organization and raise money for a great cause. So while I was hiking, I was writing blogs, I was taking photos, I was taking videos, I was chatting with people. I was doing like news interviews and all sorts of stuff to just publicize the hike and get people involved. So it wasn't just about me hiking, it was for a bigger purpose. And so back into those common questions that I get about these hikes. So what did I eat along the Mountains to Sea Trail? I certainly was not deprived. The trail goes through a lot more urban spaces than the Appalachian Trail does. So I was able to experience a lot of home cooked meals. Again, I have a lot of friends and family along the trail, being from North Carolina. That picture at the bottom right there, that was on my birthday. I got to spend the night with my old neighbors in Durham, and they made me an entire cake that they insisted I eat myself. So that was intense, but I didn't want to, I didn't want to disappoint anybody. So I realized that a lot of people were very eager to help me out, and I really did appreciate that support. And it was very rich support, that's for sure. And yeah, so aside from the home cooked meals, I ate a lot. I ate at a lot of restaurants, a lot of classic North Carolina barbecue, seafood along the coast. I had food at gas stations, general stores, grocery stores. And then, of course, I did have to eat the backpacking food from time to time, as you can see with my bowl of oatmeal there. And in the bottom left, I did get into the habit of getting an entire pizza to myself and sitting on the beach and, eating pizza, just kind of thinking about the day and the day ahead and things like that. So again, lots of great food along the Mountains to Sea Trail. And so where did I sleep on the Mountains to Sea Trail? The answer is I slept in a lot of weird places. Again, fortunately, I had friends and family along the way. Also, I had the support of the Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail. They have a trail angel network, which is, essentially people who have signed up to support hikers. So I had a list of contacts, people that I could reach out to if I was in their area, and they would come. These are just people that are very passionate volunteers that are passionate about the Mountains to Sea Trail. They would come and pick me up, take me back to their house, and I would just get to know them and be able to do my laundry. And they would, of course, feed me a home-cooked meal, and then I would be able to spend the night in a guest bedroom, which was really, really nice. And then the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, I actually got to stay with, board members and folks within that organization as well. So I was, again, very well supported while I was on the Mountain Sea Trail. That being said, that only encompassed about half of the nights on the Mountains to Sea Trail. I did have to get kind of creative aside from that in terms of where I slept. I did sleep in sheds. I did sleep in barns. Of course, I would always ask permission first. I didn't want to wake up with a shotgun in my face. I slept in old plantations, behind churches. The fire stations along the MST were super friendly, very accommodating, really supportive of the hikers. There was one instance where nobody was even in the fire station. I just contacted, or the fire chief contacted me, found out what I was doing, and he said, hey, when you're walking by, here's the code to the door, make yourself at home. So I had the whole fire station to myself for the entire night, no questions asked, access to the fridge, access to the pull-out couch. So again, I was not deprived in a lot of cases, but I did have to get creative sometimes in terms of where I slept. And then people along the way, this is, of course, a topic I'm very excited about. I met a lot of great people while I was hiking the MST. I met so many people within the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. I met staff, I met chapter leaders, I met board members, I met members, I met folks within the Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail as well, just really friendly people. And I made sure, at least I set the intention at the beginning, that I wanted to essentially be a sponge. I wanted to just be, a guy walking through and letting other people tell me what's on their mind, what's their story, what do they love about North Carolina wildlife and habitat. And in doing so, I learned a lot about this place where I call home, right? And because a lot of times I wasn't hiking with people, I wasn't encountering many hikers out there, even some day hikers, but not many people that were hiking the entire thing. So really, most of the people I saw were just regular, everyday North Carolinians, and I loved that. I really did. It was really, restored my faith in humanity, and to see how all these people would open up to me. I guess it was an easy conversation starter because a lot of times folks would have no idea what I was doing. I was just this, strange guy out hiking with a big backpack on and trekking poles. And sometimes I'd go right in front of people's yards and they'd be on their porch and they would just yell out what the heck I was doing. And before I knew it, I was sitting on their porch too and eating, a home cooked meal or something and just chatting them up and talking about their day and talking about where they're from and what they care about and things like that. And I was also able to reconnect with lots of friends and family along the way as well. So I really reestablished my roots in North Carolina. Plants along the Mountains to Sea Trail, no shortage of plant life along the Mountains to Sea Trail, more than 30 or about 3,900 native plant species, making it one of the most diverse states for flora in the Southeast. I did hike in the heart of spring, so I had plenty of allergies, as you might imagine, to the point where I was like crying all day profusely, the fluids leaving my ears, my nose, my eyes. It was pretty bad at times, as you might imagine, hiking outside all day in the middle of the spring. But that being said, I wouldn't want to do it at any other time of the year. It was really special to be able to see the environment come back to life with all these beautiful, bright, colorful blooms popping up all around me, in front of me, below me, sometimes even above me. And it was also interesting to start at the beach and hike west and see how the plant life changed as I went through these three distinct biomes: the coast, the Piedmont, and then eventually into the mountains. And then wildlife that I saw on the MST, again, high plant biodiversity, typically going to mean high biodiversity of wildlife. I don't really know why I put cows and horses. That's not technically wildlife, but in terms of animals, I saw a lot of cows and horses, so many cows and horses. And sometimes when I was going a little bit crazy, I would start talking to the cows and horses. They were everywhere. But in terms of wildlife, lots of salamanders, especially when I got to the Great Smoky Mountains, coined the salamander capital of the world, very aptly named. I got to experience spring bird migration. I hiked right through Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge, which is one of the biggest hotspots for bird diversity in the Southeast. So very cool to be able to hike through that area. I saw bears. I got to see elk, which were reintroduced into the Great Smoky Mountains in the early 2000s. So I was able to walk right by elk when I got to that section. And of course, insects, fish, you name it, I probably saw it while I was out there. And then a few challenges and mistakes. Again, the trail encompasses about 475 miles of road walking, which can be a pain in the butt. So I was very exposed while I was out there hiking on the roads. The sun was beating down. The asphalt was hard on my feet, of course, hard on all my joints. That coupled with these cars that were screaming by you at 70 miles per hour sometimes, that can be a little bit daunting. So definitely a big challenge there with those 475 miles of road walking. Off-leash dogs were also a big problem. You do hike very close to houses sometimes. I was in very rural areas, especially when I was at the coast. And so I had some encounters with big dogs, with German Shepherds, with pit bulls. Fortunately, I never had to take things to an extreme, but I was certainly on edge for a lot of the hike. And that's just more reason why the MST is trying to move the trail off of the roads and onto established trail in an attempt to keep the hikers safe out there. And then, of course, weather was tough, terrain, lots of beach walking. You can see my shoes there at the bottom right. That was probably just after 30 minutes of walking, your shoes fill up pretty quickly with sand. And favorite sections and towns. Favorite sections, the Great Smoky Mountains, of course, with all the salamanders, Pea Island Wildlife Refuge, one of my favorite sections with the birds, Eno River State Park, again, essentially the place that I grew up. So it was cool to be able to walk through that area again. Stone Mountain State Park, that was an area I had never walked through prior to hiking the Mountains to Sea Trail. So it was really fascinating to see that big granite dome crashing over you like a wave almost. Linville Gorge Wilderness, I'd say that's more type 2 fun after the fact looking back. I had heat stroke while I was in the Linville Gorge Wilderness area, so definitely sticks out to me as a memorable experience. It's very rugged terrain out there, beautiful area, but very rugged. I actually went on a backpacking trip at Linville Gorge over the weekend while I was in school, and I fell into the gorge and barely made it out alive. It's my embellished version of that. But so Linville Gorge has always been tricky for me, but maybe one day I'll go there and something memorable will happen, hopefully. Top 5 favorite towns: Durham, of course, being the hometown. Boone, plenty of friends that still lived in Boone, so I was able to reconnect with some folks while I was hiking through. Elkin, that is the official trail town of the Mountains to Sea Trail. It is to the MST how Damascus is to the AT. Elkin caters very well to the hikers. They host an annual festival there each year, really promoting the MST. Asheville, North Carolina, the trail goes right through or right underneath Asheville. So I spent took a couple days off and roamed around Asheville with a buddy, and we went to free concerts, and we went to the Arboretum up there and ate a lot of good food, drank some beer, had a good time. And then finally Ocracoke, one of my favorite towns along the MST. I went through Ocracoke during a sleepy section or a sleepy time of the year. It wasn't quite tourist season yet, so it was cool to be able to see Ocracoke when it was quiet, and they have ponies there too, so that was cool to see. And then that leads me to the end of the MST, Clingman's Dome, well over 6,000 feet. And when I finished the Mountains to Sea Trail, I felt good. I felt like, believe it or not, I felt like I could keep going. I still had some energy left. It took me just under 2 months to complete the MST. And, all that being said, I did feel like we had accomplished, myself in partnership with NCWF had accomplished what we set out to do with this project. We raised nearly $10,000 for wildlife and habitat in North Carolina, and that's what it was all about in the end. Not my own personal journey, but rather bringing to light some of these beautiful places throughout North Carolina. And when I finished hiking the MST, of course, the question on my mind was, I probably need to go get a job. So I delved into that, and I realized after hiking the MST, I studied biology in school. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but after completing the MST, I was 100% certain that I wanted to pursue a career in conservation. And it just so happened that when I finished the trail, NCWF had a position open, the conservation coordinator. I always tell people that I never anticipated that my hike would lead into a job. It just so happened to work out that way. And, I had already collaborated with NCWF staff. I had already, met a lot of the staff. I met some chapter leaders. I even, spent the night with some board members. So I was doing laundry at NCWF board members' houses and petting their dogs and eating their food and using their bathroom. And so, I mean, I got very close. It was a unique way to introduce myself to an organization, and it was a way where there was no pressure. I never felt like I was trying to prove myself, or I never felt like I was being interviewed. I was just a hiker out there that just needed to do my laundry and needed to talk to some people, and NCWF was just great support in that way. And I met so many people in the organization while I was hiking. So when I sat down for my first interview with Tara Moore, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, has moved on to bigger and better things, I guess you could say. But when I sat down for my first interview, I realized that I already know a lot of the people within this organization. I had built a lot of strong connections with people within the organization. I had already collaborated with the organization on a project, so I kind of had the inside scoop of how things work. And that went a long way. And they did fortunately hire me. And to this day, it still is a rewarding and personal job. I certainly don't take it for granted. I get to go outside and inspire people to get outdoors, and I get to educate folks about wildlife and habitat, and just have a really good time doing so. And it was an easy transition. One of the first activities that I was a part of once I got hired was going out on a hike with the Neuse River Hawks Conservationist chapter in Wake Forest. And I remember while I was hiking, I was kind of pinching myself, thinking to myself, this is my job. I mean, I wear many hats, of course, many different things and challenges, of course, but at the end of the day, I'm out there, talking with people that are passionate about wildlife and habitat and passionate about North Carolina. And sometimes I get to go on hikes with people, and what could be better than getting paid to do stuff like that, right? So now I'm going to roll into some pictures. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so I'm not going to spend too much time on these, but I do want to roll through a few. And I didn't take many pictures along the Appalachian Trail, but I do want to highlight a couple that I did take. This is the Presidential Range in New Hampshire, kind of a Lord of the Rings feel to it. McAfee Knob in Virginia. Max Patch in North Carolina. There's a red-tailed hawk swooping around in the distance there, which is really neat that day. And then, of course, Mount Katahdin in Maine, way above the clouds, kind of like you're on, the end of the earth or something like that. And so rolling into some mountains, the Sea Trail pictures, lighthouses, Ocracoke on the left and Cape Hatteras on the right. Ferry rides. This is, there were 2 ferry rides on the mountains, the Sea Trail, which was pretty cool. The ferry operators were definitely not used to pedestrians just walking on the boat. So I got special treatment. I was actually able to sit in the captain's quarters, and I got to talk to all the ferry operators, and that was really a good time. Another ferry ride picture, lots of fishing pictures. Coastal views. This is Ocracoke Island. Who doesn't love a sunset on the coast? Cedar Island. Another sunset. This is Surf City. I actually got to camp right there. That was my view. It was really nice. Ocracoke Island just before a thunderstorm. One more of Ocracoke Island at sunrise. Sunrise, not sunset. This is a bridge over the Neuse River. Surf City, long bridge, about a half a mile. The MST goes right over that bridge. Lots of small little churches along the MST, so I got to really appreciate some of the stained glass and stonework. This is in Wilkes County, a small little church in White Oak. Lots of historic sites along the MST, Bentonville Battlefield. An old textile mill in Hillsboro. Harmony Hall Plantation on the Cape Fear River. Moores Creek National Battlefield. Again, all these places, the MST runs right through. Rockford General Store on the left and Pretty's on the right. At Rockford, I ate the best sweet potato cobbler I've ever had, and Pretty's on the right, I had the best pimento cheese sandwich I've ever had in my life. These are both stores that have been around for well over 100 years. Engines on the MST. This is an old El Camino. I'm not sure if it was going to be running or not, but it was still cool to see a classic car just baking in the sun in someone's front lawn. Cessna 172 is a Lake Ridge Aero Park in Durham. There's a little grass airstrip that goes that runs very close to the MST, so I was able to see these small single engine planes landing and taking off. Holly Shelter Game Land, lots of farming pictures. I had a lot of Smithfield trucks, especially while I was on some road sections. These big Smithfield trucks filled with pigs and chickens would drive by me, fly by me, and I would, as you can imagine, the smell coming off of one of those trucks day by day, over and over again, walking by and these trucks whizzing by, that smell. Still remember that vividly. Lots of cows and horses again. This is Pilot Mountain. I kind of like this picture. It looks like they're posing for an album cover. Falls Lake. Another one of Falls Lake here. Eno River. Lots of great pictures of Eno River. Harper Creek Falls in Pisgah. I actually got to spend the afternoon. I didn't expect to go by Harper Creek Falls, and all of a sudden I saw it, and I spent about 3 hours just swimming around in there, enjoying myself. Deep Creek in the Great Smoky Mountains, Oconaluftee River in Cherokee, Lake Townsend in Greensboro, Pilot Mountain, Moses Cone Memorial Park in Watauga County. This is a place where I used to go running all the time while I was in school. Water Rock Knob, one of my favorite views along the MST. This is just before you enter the Great Smoky Mountains. Mount Mitchell, the trail goes right up and down Mount Mitchell, which is the highest point east of the Mississippi. The menacing Linville Gorge, taken from Table Rock here. Stone Mountain State Park, again with that big granite wave. Lots of trees, of course, on the Mountain Sea Trail, Spanish moss, and then bald cypress creeping out into the lake there on the right. Lots of pine trees, holly shelter game land. The famous butt tree at Trout Lake. This is a tree, again, where I used to run by every day while I was in Boone. So the butt tree always has a special place in my heart. Pisgah National Forest near Boone. And then some fungi along the trail. This is Dyrad Saddle. Puffballs, hemlock varnish shelf, straight stalked Entoloma. Plenty of turkey tail out there. And then there's some animals as well that I took pictures of. This is a bumblebee on Canadian loosewort, a snail, a very photogenic green anole, an eastern racer, swallowtail butterfly, Appalachian cottontail, box turtle, and then some blooms on the Mountains to Sea Trail. This is a dwarf crested iris, a painted buckeye, flame azaleas in all sorts of different colors, a rain lily on the left and a fern fiddlehead on the right, pink lady slipper in full bloom, mountain laurel in full bloom, rhododendron, painted trillium in the mountains in bloom, fire pink, Philadelphia fleabane, Jack in the Pulpit, mountain dog hobble, and then one of my favorites, the showy orchis. And again, there's a lot of different blooms that I saw, but hopefully that gives you an idea of just some of the beautiful things I did see while I was hiking. And wrapping up my presentation here, I do want to mention, just the 7 principles of leave no trace. I'm not going to go into all these, but I do think it's important to mention. I encourage folks to check out lnt.org. It is important when you go out and enjoy these spaces that you do so ethically, that you do so responsibly. I've certainly made plenty of mistakes. I'm not self-righteous about this or anything, but I do think it's worth giving that organization a visit on their website there. They offer training programs as well if you're interested, and I really do believe in the work that they're doing. I think they're encouraging, again, ethical recreation outdoors. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention how to get involved. I want to mention this quote from the legendary Aldo Leopold from Sand County Almanac. Acts of creation are ordinarily reserved for gods and poets, but humbler folk may circumvent this restriction if they know how. To plant a pine, for example, one need be neither god nor poet. One need only own a shovel. By virtue of this curious loophole in the rules, any clodhopper may say, let there be a tree, and there will be one. And what I get from this quote is you don't need to have some special skill, some special experience in order to get involved with an organization. Volunteering is a fantastic way to be a part of some of these organizations' missions. And of course, I'm going to be partial to NCWF. I think we offer through our chapter network some outstanding volunteer opportunities, but there are other opportunities as well with, for example, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, the Friends of the Mountains, the Sea Trail, the Nature Conservancy, Audubon Society, all sorts of different organizations that encourage habitat and wildlife and recreation outdoors. And then one of the last things I'll mention is that 2023 is the year of the trail. I know we're getting to the end of 2023, but it was, a big initiative to educate folks about the trail. It was a big initiative to manage trails, to expand trail networks and get people outside, because in the end, trails really do enhance communities. They encourage physical fitness. They create opportunities for outdoor recreation. They protect the environment, appreciation for nature, preserve and historically valuable areas. So I would encourage folks to just, look up Year of the Trail and just to see, everything this initiative has accomplished this year. All right, so that concludes my presentation. That's a privy on the Appalachian Trail there, and there's my email in case folks want to ask me any questions. I will go ahead and stop my share here, and thank you guys very much.
Wow, Luke.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible. Just love to hear those stories. Any folks with questions, please put them in the chat. I will say some of your food choices seemed a little bit questionable in some of those photos. Looked like some worms on top of your meals. Maybe it was a ribbon of peanut butter.
I promise that is something I didn't cross into eating worms. But if I was hungry enough, I guess I would have had to. But
but yeah, you look pretty lean at the end of your Appalachian Trail hike.
Yeah, I joke with my family a lot. I was essentially feral when I got off the trail, and I went back home to my parents' house, and I was like eating food. I was like eating things with my hands, and it took me a while to re-enter society, I guess you could say.
I bet. I do have a quick question. There are a few questions in the chat. I just was interested if I know most people who hike the AT have a trail name, and you never mentioned if you were honored with the trail name.
I was honored with a trail name, and that is tradition to have a trail name while you're hiking. And at the time, and still today, I'm very interested in birds. So I couldn't avoid a name that didn't relate to my height. So my trail name was Big Bird while I was on the AT. I guess I look like Big Bird, and also I was looking at birds. So
that's very fitting.
Yes, very fitting. I agree.
One of the questions from the chat, which was, how long did each trip take, Luke? Thanks.
So the Appalachian Trail, again, I did that one relatively quick. I started right after I graduated. I mean, the day after I graduated, I was on the trail. So May 7th, I started, and I ended August 10th. So I did it in under 100 days, which is, again, I don't advise that. I do think I took time to stop and smell the roses. I just didn't take many breaks. I guess you could say I didn't spend too much time in town. And the Mountains to Sea Trail, I started the beach in March, and I finished in mid-March, and I finished in late May, I believe. Yeah.
Right on. Another question, have to ask, being a fellow trash picker-upper, did you find a lot of trash on either hike?
I think I know this Debbie. If this is
yes,
the Debbie I'm thinking
Debbie.
about, yeah, Debbie is a superhero in terms of picking up trash. But this must be the Debbie I'm thinking about. Thanks for asking the question, Debbie. I did notice, as you would imagine, as you get closer to civilization, you see more trash on the AT. When I would get to road crossings, I would see a lot of trash. And on the Mountains to Sea Trail, anytime I was close to civilization, there'd be a decent amount of trash. At the same time, I think the ATC and also the Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail do a good job making sure that the trails are clean. But as you imagine, there's trash out there too. With the leave no trace thing, that's why I put that in there, just encouraging that if folks are going out there, they're not contributing to that, right?
Awesome. Yeah. Let's see. Another question from Andrea Thomas. How long will it take for the Mountains to Sea Trail to get off of roads, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I imagine it's gonna take some time. I mean, to get fully off the road, I mean that's probably decades in the future. Again, I will say that there is a lot of motivation, a lot of funding for MST right now. So, but it takes a lot of time even to, establish a quarter mile of trail. So it's going to take time, but things are moving in the right direction for sure.
Awesome. This is more of a question that I have for you, but well, I think it's cool that, I grew up in North Carolina and I've seen parts of the mountain, the Sea Trail. I grew up on Falls Lake and I know exactly where it runs through on Falls Lake. I've been fishing off in some of those areas.
Oh, yeah.
Anyhow, sidebar. We are the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, and
Mhm.
you are Big Bird. I want to ask you, was there one in particular encounter with it doesn't have to be a bird, but it could be a bird or an animal or a bird you learned or got close with, just an intimate encounter you had with a wildlife species that on either trail that you won't forget or that that you'll always remember? Was it a bird that you was doing something silly or singing a song that you learned, or was there some animal encounter, wildlife experience that you'll never forget?
That's a really good question. And there's certainly a lot of things that come to mind right off the bat. I come back to the Mountains of Sea Trail while I was hiking on the beach in the Outer Banks, and this was just after I had stopped in a town and gotten a nice fresh shower. And then I returned to the beach, and this big pelican comes swooping by and drops the largest poop on me that I've ever experienced in my life. And I'm just soaked. It was liquidy. I don't know if there was ocean water or what was going on, but yeah, it was, I laughed it off, but that's something I will never forget. And on the Appalachian Trail, of course, everybody's got a bear story. I had encounters with bears for sure, usually at a distance, but there was one instance where it was the middle of the night and it was in North Carolina. And there was a bear that was hiking. I mean, I could see its silhouette right outside my tent. And so that's something that always sticks out to me, just that, if you're just that level of fear is hard to forget. So I was kind of just sitting in my tent waiting for the bear to move along. But I'm sure there's a lot of other stories, but I'll keep it there for now.
I wasn't expecting the pelican story, but I mean that is pretty
It happens.
incredible and unique.
It happens.
We've got one more question here from Andrea Thomas. What was the longest period you were alone on either trail without seeing another human?
Yeah, on the Mountains of Sea Trail, I saw people, I'd say about every day. Again, not always hikers, but just regular everyday North Carolinians. I would see folks out there. On the Appalachian Trail, it was certainly more remote. I did hike with two people on and off for the entire length of the trail. That being said, it was on and off. And there was one time where I spent, 2-3 full days with very minimal contact with people. So yeah, you can go a little bit crazy, but I kept myself occupied. Fortunately, I always have a monologue running in my head that keeps me company.
Well, that's fantastic, Luke. I appreciate you sharing. I'm sure everyone appreciates you sharing your experiences and stories. I'm gonna pick your brain later because we work together. So
Yeah, I appreciate you guys, and I saw that it is indeed the Debbie that I was thinking about. So thanks,
Yeah.
Debbie. But yeah,
any last questions from anyone?
I know we're over time too.
Yeah.
So
Well, this is recorded, so again, we'll send this out to everyone. Thank you so much, Luke. That was fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you guys, and thanks to the Union County chapter too. Appreciate you guys.
Yes. Thank you, Brianna. Thanks, Union County.
All right.
You guys all have a wonderful night.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat, but thank you so much for doing this. That was really interesting.
Good thing. I guess happy trails, right?
Happy trails. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy trails and happy holidays. All right. See you guys.